Why I abandoned intentional fasting. A few years ago, I heard about fasting. So many benefits. Autophagy, potentially higher growth hormone during the fasting. Now, in the last couple of months, maybe years even, more research has come out. And it seems to be the case that often fasting did not have the actual benefits that a few years ago, seemingly at least, were ascribed to fasting. Now, I also tried a lot of fasting myself, and maybe mostly one could summarize it as follows. Intentional fasting I would describe as system 2 override of hunger drive. Now, while I could also fast if my body actually does not want to eat, the main idea I think of fasting is to try to override basically system 1 as defined by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in their book Thinking Fast and Slow. So I, system 2, rational mind, overdrive my hunger drive. Now, it's not my job entirely to supply myself with nutrients as system 2, but mostly maybe to think slow and ideally rationally. But it's system 1's job to supply myself with the right nutrients, and I have, as system 2, mostly no idea what I actually need. Do I need this many milligrams of vitamin C or 3.7 grams of fiber today in this meal? I have no idea. So while initially the attempt of system 2 override seems always to promise basically new heights, I think in the long term this is only possible because, well, system 2 basically in the past did its work properly. And now we both actually have a functioning body with ideally repleted glycogen stores, a functioning brain, and also ideally being well slept. So initially, fasting always seems like a good idea because it's saving me time. I don't have to eat now. I can work more. I can work for 8 hours straight without eating. I'm more alert. Maybe because adrenaline is now higher, maybe also because cortisol is higher. But what I'm doing is, at a fixed daily average nutrient need, if I override my system 1 again and again and again, then what other choice does system 1 have to eventually override system 2, me? So if I fast for 16 hours in the morning, till basically the rest of the 16 hours, then what big wonder that system 1 eventually takes over. It just makes me eat. And not just eat the first meal, but also the second meal and the third meal, because in 2 hours we already have to go to sleep. And thus, while I now still often don't eat for hours, I try to listen to the hunger cues my body actually gives me, which sounds ridiculous. And one also has to mention, this, at least for me, only works if I abstain from sugary things. If I abstain from things that have been, let's say, to some extent artificially manipulated to be tastier. One could also say they increase with a given amount of hunger how much I can eat, but also result in more energy than I actually need in a ratio of nutrients that probably is not what my body otherwise would choose. And thus, this intuitive eating at these given constraints replaced intentional fasting.